Let's continue talking about information overload. More precisely, information overload can best be seen as a situation which arises when an individual's efficiency and effectiveness is using information, whether for their work, studies, citizenship, or life generally, is hampered by the amount of relevant and potentially useful information available to them. We talked about this topic on the previous video, but I also wanted to complement this because I think it is really important, especially when we are talking about having a new generation that cannot focus, as well as before that has difficulties in retaining attention and other symptoms that could be a consequence of information overload in our lives. The information must be of value, or it could simply be ignored, and it must be known about and must be accessible, or the overload will only be potential. Although that latter situation could certainly cause anxiety or FOMO, one of the topics we talk about in this channel, fear of missing out. The feeling of overload is usually, though not invariably, accompanied by a perceived loss of control over the situation, and often by feelings of being overwhelmed. We have that it could be also pointed out that these feelings are often related to a perceived lack of time to deal with all the information to hand. Earlier, Wilson in 1995 defined overload as the situation in which someone knows that relevant information exists, but knows that they cannot access and use it properly because of time constraints. Time pressures have been mentioned as a specific cause of overload in numerous studies. For example, among health service managers and board level directors. In its stream, it seems clearly that information overload may lead directly to problems of mental health and physical health, as well as loss of efficiency at whatever tasks are being undertaken. So we have the potential lack of attention, potential lack of focus, and the need to not miss out. But now we have also, or it could lead to lower levels of efficiency and doing your tasks in the best way possible. Did you believe that? But it is like a chain process of we start at some point and then it can unleash numerous affections to our body in general. Information overload has generally been regarded as an issue by definition affecting individual, but some authors have understood it as a problem affecting an organization, a city, or even a society. We can also find that overload at the organization level, meaning a situation in which the extent of perceived individual information overload is sufficiently widespread within the organization as to reduce the overall effectiveness of management operations, could be also another possible scenario. When we talk about information overload, we often think about personal usage, but this could also lead to a majority group of people in workspaces and others. But what about the causes? The causes of overload have been analyzed in a number of publications. But what about the Epler and Mendes in 2004, where they gave a detailed list of causes of information overload for the management disciplines in the early years of the millennium, categorized as personal factors, information characteristics, task, and process patterns. organizational design, and informational technology. In general, it can be said that the definition and perceived effects of overload have not changed much, if at all, over time, that these potential causes have multiplied with the arrival of new technologies and new information formats, and also the ones about to come. We also have Hartog in 2017. He makes the following point: information overload is the breaking concept that merges the surplus of information as an external reality with a psychological response of feeling overwhelmed that that could be an internal reality. Little progress will be made in accessing the causes of and solutions to overload if only the objective amount and nature of information and data or only the subjective individual response to it are considered. The two must be considered together. The causes of overload can be considered under four headings: too much information, diversity, complexity, and novelty of information. Also, we have push information, personal factors, and individual differences. Too much information, or TMI, is a phrase often associated with overload, together with information explosion, information inundation, information access, and information tsunami. We have different examples to support these ideas, but I'm going to mention some. A weekly edition of the New York Times in the early years of the 21st century contained more information than the average person was likely to come across in a lifetime in 17th century England. Also, more information was created in the last 3 decades of the 20th century than in the previous 5,000 years. In 2012, about 2.5 exabytes of data were created each single day, with the amount doubling every 3 years. And more data were transmitted across the internet each second that were stored in the whole internet 20 years previously. That is an enormous amount of information. In the late 1970s, it was estimated that it would take 700 years to read 1 year's research literature in one subject. Now, this subject was chemistry. But by 2012, enough data was being generated each day to fill all the libraries in the United States 8 times over. And that was only in 2012. How much would it be now? A striking example of the TMI problem from a medical context, but which may stand for many other settings, is given by Fraser and Dunstan in 2010. They show that it is literally possible or impossible now to read all relevant material even within a narrow specialty. With a trainee in this specialty of cardiac imaging setting, they put that person to read the record relevant medical literature. Reading 40 papers a day, 5 days a week, they will require over 11 years to bring themselves up to date. By the time they had finished, another 82,000 relevant papers will have been published, requiring another 8 years to read it. Although it is unlikely that anyone in the past several decades has tried to read everything related to their specialty, and the calculation is therefore not realistic, it does give a flavor of the TMI concern. How much time do you think it will require for yourself to be up to date with your area? And we're not talking about a career. We're talking about your area on what you do in your field at work. To be up to date in how to manage a specific machine. Up to date on how to teach someone else someone. how much time in order for you to manage a specific program you have, taking into account all the updates and to be really, really up to date with everything. How much time would you require to be up to date with all the techniques or all the papers related to be a secretary or related to be in charge of a line in a factory? We might say like, I'm just going to go to through the training program. But if you go into the research area, if you investigate by yourself, you're going to see tons of paper, researches, articles, nowadays podcasts, social media accounts of experts and others that will require you an enormous amount of time to be up to date just with what you're doing, not going into an immersed career of 4 or 5 years or whatsoever. Isn't that shocking that we nowadays see a personal media account being really, really overwhelming? Our feeds being really overwhelming, and that we cannot concentrate in one single topic in an estimate of an hour. But when we put that into scenarios that we need to be up to date, yes or yes, we need to perform better. And in order to maintain a job, in order to maintain a family and others, the matter becomes serious in a way we haven't even calculated before. And with these calculations, there aren't even like 100% accurate. Imagine if they were like the specific calculation of how much time used for a medical professional in the specific field. That is specific field. That is an enormous amount of time. So this is concerning. And also, do we need so many papers? Do we need so many researches? Do we need so many interviews? Do we need so many books? Do we need so many podcasts? Do we need so many experts talking in LinkedIn, Instagram, and other social media? I think segmentation is necessary, but in a deeper level, even for inner algorithms on these platforms. We need to segment information. We need to know which paper says something really similar to the other because studies are being made, but again and again and again and again. And they also need to be retested with different types of groups alongside time, location, age groups, and other differences that could be significantly affecting a project, even though you test the same with the same questions, same examples, same factors, etc. So, do we need that much information? I think we don't. But do we still need information, significant information? Absolutely, yes. We still need to be up to date. We still need our educational programs and things to be better. But that comes with optimization, not with overload of information. We also have, in a different context, personal informatics systems, which track users and collect data related to life elements such as health, well being, diet, finance, productivity, or reminiscence, may also be a cause of overload. This may be by virtue of the sheer amount of data collected, as well as the many possible correlations between data elements. For example, quality of sleep correlated with the weather, with amount of physical activity that day, and with the duration of nature of music which the user had listened to. It is worth noting that feelings of TMI in the 21st century, which is generally attributed to email, social media, big data, a publication explosion, and other manifestation of digital technology, bear a striking resemblance to the feeling evoked in early modern times by the development of printing. This area is analyzed by Blair in 2003. Notes that at the time of Gutenberg, there were 30,000 handwritten books in Europe, while 50 years after his death, there were 10 million printed books. She quotes Conrad Gessner complaining of a confusing and harmful abundance of books. In 1545, and Andrew Bailey a century later, lamenting that we have reason to fear that the multitude of books which grows every day in a prodigious fashion will make the following centuries fall into a state of barbarism as that of the centuries that followed the fall of the Roman Empire. Would you believe that? The phrase "date as smog" by Schenck in 1997 is very telling as it conjures up an image of a lack of clarity and accurate perception of what is there. The diversity and complexity of information, formats, and media are generally hidden by the homogenization provided by the sometimes highly convenient web browser. This homogenizing effect makes it difficult to distinguish between information which is useful and useless, accurate or inaccurate, reliable or unreliable. Hence, it increases the potential for overload. The unconnected, excited nature of information with causes overload. The more diverse and complex a collection of information is, and the more alternative it offers or appears to offer, the more likely it is to cause overload. So we have this hypothesis. But do you think it could be an actual affirmation? Interdisciplinary work requiring an individual to deal with information from a variety of disciplines, as I've been mentioning in the past. Just with social media, we have, in a short amount of time, so many topics to digest in just one feed, has long been recognized as posing a particular overload problem. As regards the novel content of incoming information, there is a sweet spot in relation to the amount of information presented and the decision made on it. Adding information beyond that point leads to overload and a decline in the quality of decision. Shunin and Hara in 1990, Jones and Kelly in 2080, but also Kutlaw in 1993 expresses the same idea in slightly different terms. The balance between redundant, already known information and unique new information is crucial. Too much uniqueness leads to anxiety and overload. Too much redundancy leads to boredom. Push services, particularly on ambient mobile devices, have added really to the perception of overload, with information being constantly imposed without being sought. The ubiquity of mobile devices has added to the always on syndrome, often associated with information overload. Email was originally held to be a major cause of overload, if not the major cause, and is still often noted as part of the problem. Social media, such as Facebook and Twitter, nowadays ads, are now often considered to be the main overwhelming medias and responsible for much, if not most, overload because of the ease with which they allow the creation, duplication, and sharing of information. I would also include Instagram nowadays. Doubt has been expressed as to whether push technology because of its potential to send people the information they need. Now we have artificial intelligence, which we only ask them based on a specific context and situation, and they will also grant us information. So also if being filtering more, touch more specific points, and of course adequating the information to our own personal life in a deeper way or a more specific way. But what do you think? Do you think that AI is going to speed up the information overload fed in its maker way? Is it going to put it as something exponential? Or is it really like that? Like social media just increased that after email? Or did it start just with the intro of the internet with the society when we just first starting to scroll down on web browsers, and that's how everything is starting with information overload? Or do you think it was like really, really more in the past, or it's going to hit its peak in the future? Thank you for being here. I hope this was helpful. And of course, see you in another video, or talk to you in another video actually. Bye bye.